Hoy en el indicador de BKF nos acompaña el doctor Philmar Minnaar, gerente técnico del IAASB. Acompáñanos.
BKF, comprometidos con el crecimiento empresarial.
In terms of the new standard, ISA 701, key audit matters are those matters that require significant auditor attention. So very simply put, the auditor report needs to disclose those matters where the auditor invested or spent most of his significant judgments, right? The reason for this is that in the past our audit reports all look the same. It left very little value for the user. We want to make it more transparent. So the concept that the IAASB has come out with is key audit matters to show to the users of audit reports where we spent most of our time, but not necessarily time, but most of our attention in terms of what made this audit more complex, or where did we spend more judgment than before. Well, it is very important in the sense that, as I said in the past, we only saw a report and it was only to say whether it was a qualified opinion and if it was an unqualified opinion. In the past, we only got more information if it was a qualified opinion. So going forward, what is important is now we can see where the auditor actually spent his time, regardless whether there's a qualified or unqualified opinion. So it is important for the users to say, look, even though there is no qualification, we know that this company has got major financial instruments, or maybe they have a merger, and we can see where did the auditor spend all his time, was there maybe significant judgment, and that adds to transparency of the auditor's report. So the audit standard, ISA 701, gives you some guidance, and it says that you identify key audit matters by firstly looking at what has been reported to management in terms of ISA 260. ISA 260 gives you guidance on what matters at the end of the audit shall be presented, and that includes many things like the scope of the audit, the significant risks, even matters that may not be significant risks. So how do you determine what is a key audit matter? You first go to what has been reported by the auditor to those charged with governance, and then from that list you decide what was of key consideration, what was significant auditor attention for the auditor, and that is the criteria where you decide on what to include of those matters into the auditor report. So typically it would be those areas where the auditor had to apply judgment, all right, because that would typically be where your significant risks are. So if I can give you an example where there's a merger that's taken place, you will need to determine goodwill, and those are generally areas where there is quite estimation, there's uncertainty, and so there's significant auditor attention. So this is we also typically get with financial instruments, you know, where there is significant estimation uncertainty. Maybe if in a tax calculation where you have to calculate deferred tax, which is based on estimations, where you have a construction entity where you determine your revenue based on on the stage of completion. These areas require judgment, and it is generally where you need your partner to be involved, with someone with a high level of audit experience. So this is quite important when you determine what your key audit matters are. The UK has implemented it first back in 2013. They were the first country to implement it, and it was very successful. They took the lead. They in fact record more disclosures than what is currently required by the ISIS. So at the end of December 31st, 2016, the ISAs came in, effective, and it was a huge success, I would say. What we have seen is that there was a slow decline in the amount of key audit matters that have been reported. So for the first year, we've seen many significant risks that were reported. But I think the general consensus is we don't want to overload the audit report with key audit matters, because then it becomes, it dilutes the value of the audit report. So what we've seen in especially the developing countries, in some research that ACCA, the Association for Chartered Certified Accountants in the UK, they've seen that the average amount of key audit matters is around 3 to 4 per audit report. Okay, that is just the guidance. You could have more, but you have to be careful not to prepare or present too many key audit matters. Otherwise, the value of the report becomes diluted. And we want to keep the report still transparent. We want to make it useful to our users. And yes, it has been a huge success. That's a very good question. The standard ISA 701 provides for a couple of scenarios. So firstly, it is where local regulation may preclude you from disclosing a key audit matter. So you may have a country that puts in their Companies Act or in their law legislation to say, look, our auditors may not disclose any key audit matters. A second scenario is where there is a personal threat, or not a personal threat, the public interest would outweigh the benefits. Meaning you may want to disclose something, but it may give away a competitive edge, maybe. You may want to disclose that it was a merger, but disclosing that information would outweigh the public interest. It is supposed to happen very rarely, all right? So the standard says you should have at least one key audit matter for a listed entity, but in rare circumstances, it could happen that you do not have a key audit matter. And we've seen that in some entities. The standard further provides scenarios where you may have a listed entity that may be dormant, or there may be no activities. Now, obviously in this scenario, it is very likely that you may not have a key audit matter. And those are the scenarios where you wouldn't have a key audit matter. What are the requirements for the auditor to reveal key audit matters in reports? So ISA 701 says whenever we have a listed entity, you have to disclose it in the auditor's report for general purpose or complete general purpose set of financial statements. So you wouldn't do it for interim financial statements that are maybe an abridged version in terms of ISA 36. So it's complete sets of general purpose financial statements. That is the requirement for listed entities. However, you can do it on a voluntary basis. So a preparer of a financial statement, let's say a big construction company, they may feel that they like this new report and it gives some credibility to their financial statements. They may approach their auditors and say, look, we want to voluntarily adopt ISA 701, or we would like you to do it and report our financial statements. And then the legislation of a country can, for example, say, look, all medical aids, for example, must disclose key audit matters in their auditor's report. In where I come from in South Africa, that is, for example, the medical schemes. And then, for example, public entities, the Auditor General of that particular country may require, through legislation, that the auditor include key audit matters in his auditor's report.
Los invitamos a seguirnos en nuestras redes sociales como BKF Colombia y a leer esta y otras entrevistas en nuestra página web www.bkf.com.co, pestaña El Indicador. Recuerden que en BKF estamos comprometidos con el crecimiento empresarial. Gracias por elegirnos. Hasta la próxima.